drive. Tatum the finish. It is banner 18. The mission commanding is mission accomplished.
What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with another episode of You Got Boston, live from the Kia Center, where the Celtics just fell to the Orlando Magic 95-93 and now dropped to a 2-1 lead in the first round of the playoffs after going up 2-0 at home versus the Magic. This one was a really tough watch. If you watched this game, you saw some pretty terrible Celtics basketball in the third quarter offensively. You saw a slugfest. This game dragged on. The official game duration was 2 hours and 46 minutes. Usually games will be like 2 hours and 20 minutes. So just a lot of fouls, a lot of reviews, a flagrant foul in the mix. There's not been a flagrant foul in each game in the series. So I'll start at the top. But again, for the postseason, I'm maintaining this format of 4 things to find encouraging about each game, win or loss. First 2 games were really easy because the Celtics won and a lot of good things happened that contributed to the win. But it actually wasn't that hard to find 4 positive things from this game as well. If you want to find more of my negative takes, you can catch those on the Garden Report on our post-game show on CLNS Media. But on this podcast, I'm just going to keep it to 4 things that I found encouraging about the loss. And number 1, I'll keep it brief. Number 1 is Jayson Tatum. First of all, the fact that he was available was a huge sigh of relief because just a couple of hours ago, literally this morning, he was still doubtful to play tonight. Joe Mazzulla had said it was a severe bone bruise on the radio yesterday. And it was something that was potentially going to hold him out for a couple games. People were saying, maybe he keeps him out the series. Obviously, nobody knows for certain, but it just started to create this situation of maybe he's going to be very limited here. And maybe this is something that's going to plague them throughout the postseason. Even if they get out of this round, is he going to be dealing with that wrist injury through June if they make it that far? And I don't want to overreact, but 39 minutes and 21 seconds later, I don't think that is cause for concern. Tatum's wrist. He came out of the gates swinging, hit 7 of his first 12 shots, really cooled down, hit 3 of his final 10, but still had a good stat by this one, 36 points. I was 12 of 12 from the free throw line, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal, a block, and then the part that really hurt Celtics was the 7 turnovers, including 2 travel calls and a couple of really ill-advised, out-of-character passes that I think were a result of the Magic's defensive pressure. Nothing to do with his wrist that I saw. I'm sure it was bothering him a little bit. Maybe there were moments that he would have done something different if it wasn't for the fact that he was dealing with the pain of the wrist injury. But from what we were able to see, this was a good Jayson Tatum game as far as health goes. And ultimately, big picture, you want to win these games, but more importantly, you want to make sure that you come out of these games healthy. And I will say, I said that on this podcast a couple weeks, but I wasn't concerned about facing this Magic team. I thought the Celtics were going to be able to stay healthy, and honestly, usually dangerous foul calls dangerous plays are not necessarily the fouls. It's the non-contact plays are the ones that usually result in actual injuries. So that hasn't really been the case. We saw game 1, Tatum's wrist. Game 2, Porzingis gets a gash on his head, gets 5 stitches. Both of those are flagrant foul calls. And then today, game 3, Cole Anthony yanks Jaylen Brown's arm and he dislocates his index finger. And so 3 games, 3 flagrant fouls, 3 injuries to key players. Obviously, I think Porzingis' head's not going to be a big deal. It sounds like Jaylen's finger is not going to be a huge deal either. He said, I have 9 more, so I'll be fine. And I don't think Tatum's wrist is going to be a long-term concern either. But big picture, the fact that he was out there today, I saw him go through warm-ups. We hadn't even seen him shoot, so I was thinking to myself, maybe it's swelled up on, maybe it's stiffened up. Maybe he literally can't go. But I saw him go through shoot-around, saw him kind of, go through his pregame shooting. We weren't able to see him at shoot-around this morning. And thought that he looked completely normal and was dunking in warm-up times and then came out of the gates and had a really strong start to this game. And so that's ultimately the most important thing here. Anything else is going to be secondary. They need Tatum to be at his best for them to win anything, whether it's the series or the championship, which is really what it's about because they can probably get out of the series without him anyways. And ultimately, I think you saw a really positive sign from him. It was positive when he was upgraded from doubtful to questionable about 2 hours before tip-off, and then it was even more positive when I watched him warm up, and then it was even more positive when he was upgraded to available, and then we watched him have a game that he didn't look limited. And he didn't look like he was in a ton of pain. I think he was kind of embracing the wrist celebration as well. So that's the big picture. That's the most important thing. And if he'd come out there and been grimacing and not really able to pass, or even when Drew started with the mouth finger, you could tell that it was really bothering him, the mouth finger cast. This wasn't the case in this game. And so I honestly would have even forgot about it if he didn't keep doing the wrist celebration thing. Like, I think it looked like he was pretty comfortable out there. So that's the most important thing. Big picture takeaway. Second thing that I'm going to express positivity towards, I think something that was kind of encouraging, is Luke Cornet was able to find ways to impact this game. He wasn't perfect. I still think he hasn't been able to recreate some of the success from the regular season. And part of that is because I think he just outplayed guys during the regular season. He came into games with more energy. He out-hustled opposing teams. His motor was really one of his biggest strengths. And then we see in the postseason that nobody's taking possessions off. He's not going to get those sneaking into the lane and getting an offensive rebound and slamming it back. I think that ultimately that's, those are the kinds of plays that opposing teams have to cut, right? If they're dealing with you, if they're preparing for game plans, if they know that's Luke's thing. So he has been neutralized a little bit, but in games 1 and 2, he really wasn't able to find ways to be effective. And I thought in this one he was. There was a couple moments where he had some good connections. Tatum hit 3 of 6 field goals. He actually was responsible for 6 of their 9 bench points. And he had the highest plus minus in the game. He was a +8 in his 19 minutes, 6 rebounds, 3 of which were offensive. And offensive rebounds were big here. The Magic had 15. The Celtics only had 8, and 3 of them were from Luke. So it wasn't enough to make a huge dent in this game. I probably would have wanted to see a little bit more from him because Porzingis was pretty ineffective in this one. And, he finishes with just 7 points on 3 of 10 shooting. Defensively, I thought that he had a tough game. Down the stretch, Franz Wagner targeted him twice and, went from a tie game to a 4-point swing in just a couple minutes there. So Porzingis struggled in this one. And honestly, in hindsight, maybe they do go to Luke a little bit more. But most importantly, through games 1 and 2, it just looked like this wasn't going to be the matchup for him. He wasn't going to be able to recreate some of what worked for him during the regular season. And now, sitting here at 1:15 in the morning on Saturday night, actually feel pretty, or Friday night, actually. It's Saturday, but it's Friday night. So early Saturday morning, I think you're seeing flashes of Luke begin to make that impact. And one of those moments was Luke had an offensive rebound and slammed it back and was kind of staring down some of the Magic players. I think that you could just sense that he started to feel a little bit more comfortable out there. And physicality is so important to this team right now. Everybody talks about a post game. We have to match Orlando's physicality. It's just so much easier said than done. And I think he's a guy that all year was one of the Celtics' more physical players. And this has been a big discussion, a big part of his game. He's talked about it, that he's evolved from being a 3-point shooting stretch big to a more physical kind of bruising big. And so they're going to need that, even if it's 15 minutes, if it's 12 minutes, if it's 20 minutes like it was tonight. And I thought that he brought it. And that's why you can see that in the plus minus category, he's the only one that had, he was a +8. The only one since Apple was a +6. Porzingis was a -16. So sometimes the plus minus stuff doesn't necessarily match the eye test. I thought tonight it did not when it came to that trio of bigs where he really had a hard time there on both ends. So those my first 2 things. I think number 3 is the fact they lost by 2. And this might be a little bit of a cop-out, but if you look across the board, they have 9 points off the bench. Franz has 32. Paolo has 29. Porzingis has 7 points on 3 of 10 shooting. They only made 9 threes. Down the stretch, a lot of weird stuff happened. There was an 8-second call that was deemed in a different whistle. The final play was definitely not 0.3 seconds. It was definitely time on the clock, and they just called it 0.3 seconds. They weren't able to review it. I don't know why, but they weren't able to review it. And then the turnover, Celtics have 19 turnovers, which was really, I haven't seen them turn the ball over. Live ball turnovers, out of character plays, things that just really were out, just like out to me as just not typical Celtics basketball. And despite all that, they lose by 2. And they could have won this game if the last couple minutes, if a couple plays had broken their way. So I say all that to say, I think Orlando had a really great game, defensively, offensively, and it wasn't enough it was almost not enough to pull away with the win here. And it ended up being enough. Celtics outscored the Magic by double digits in the second and fourth quarters. They outscored them 32-18 in the second quarter and 33-22 in the fourth quarter. But that third quarter, they scored 11 points. It was their feast in 2 seasons in a quarter. and they weren't able to overcome it. And so I think I look at the Celtics offense and it's like they scored 27 points in the first, 32 in the second, and 33 in the fourth. They often have talk about as a metric for opposing teams is you want to have 25-point quarters defensively. So you want to hold an opposing team to 25 points in a quarter, and you want to do that as many times as you can in a game and as many times as you can during a season. And ultimately, they were able to do that defensively 3 times. They held the Magic to under 25 points 3 times, and they scored above 25 points 3 times. So normally that would spell a victory. I think it was such a disastrous third quarter from a scoring standpoint that very rarely are you going to be able to overcome the fact that you only scored 11 points in a period. So that's kind of what this came down to. And the reason I find it encouraging is because if I'm Orlando, I am sitting there saying, a lot of things went our way. They struggled. They hit 9 threes. That's out of character for them. The only attempt was 27. And I do think that 11 is, the Magic running them off the line. But despite that, they're not going to turn the ball over 19 times again. I think that so much of it was out of character. I think they're going to go back in the film room and they're going to be appalled at some of the decisions they made off traps and things like that. So, if this was a 25-point loss, you say yourself, everything went wrong, but the score reflected that. The fact that they hung in there gives you confidence heading into the rest of the series is that it almost felt like this couldn't be much worse. And it's not really true because Tatum had some tough shots in the second quarter. Jaylen had a big push in the fourth. Some things did break their way, but ultimately, the 2-point swing is actually pretty encouraging in a sense, if that makes sense. And I'll have 2 more positive things, but first, a quick message from our friends over from PrizePicks.
PrizePicks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. Cash in on the basketball playoffs with PrizePicks. Don't miss your last chance to add your favorite players from the court to your PrizePicks lineup. Whether it's points, rebounds, assists, take your pick of more or less for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. The basketball playoffs are here and the action is heating up on PrizePicks, the best place to cash in on your favorite spots. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game.
So one of the things that I'm going to say was a positive in this one is actually, it's a mixed bag, but I'm going to say it's a positive, and I'm encouraged by the fact that Jaylen Brown was still able to find ways to be effective in this game. First and foremost, because he was added to the injury report this morning around noon, and it was the first time during the postseason that he's been on the injury report back with that same right knee posterior impingement bone bruise that he's been dealing with since mid-February. So it's been 3 months of this now, or 2.5 months of this now. And ultimately, he looked great in game 2. He was hobbled a little bit afterwards. A lot of people pointed it out to me after the game. I didn't even really notice it in the final minute of that game. And also after his post-game interview, I didn't notice that he was hobbled, but did go back and catch that. And so was happy to see he wasn't in the injury report yesterday. And then, he gets added to it today. And I was thinking to myself, to add him on the second day, it does feel like maybe this is something that's going to hold him out here. And if it does hold him out, how long is it holding him out for? Are we back to square one? Did the knee injections not help? What's kind of where are they really at right now? And Jaylen was able to play. He went through warm-ups. I thought it looked pretty normal. There was he at one point it looked like he was able to try to dunk and then he wasn't able to, but he clearly dunked in the game. So he's definitely still able to dunk. But he didn't play a perfect game like Tatum. The turnovers were way too high. He finishes with 6, Tatum 7. But still, I thought that he was able to get to his spots. I thought that he shot 7 of 14 from the field, and I felt like the offensive foul calls were a little bit weak on him, just considering sort of the contact that was being let go on the other side. And at the same time, so I felt like he could have had a bigger game than he did based on just how he was moving and how he was able to impact the game. He got a tough whistle. I normally don't bring up officiating. I thought he had a really tough whistle. I thought the Celtics in general did, but I thought he in particular had a tough whistle on this one because he is so strong and they don't really have anybody over there that can match that. So they were kind of hacking him. And then a couple of times he uses his forearm to push off and then they called an offensive foul. And it's putting him in a tough spot. But bigger picture, the fact that he was able to go was big because he's already missing time in game 3 of the first round. That's a bad sign. And that's where I thought we were going to head a couple hours ago because when he was on that injury report, I started thinking to myself, yeah, maybe he's not good to go. Maybe he's not able to impact this game today. Maybe he's going to miss 2 games now. And then when Tatum was downgraded or upgraded from doubtful to questionable, I thought to myself, maybe Tatum realizes that Brown can't play, so he thinks he has to play. He's going to play hurt now, and Brown's not going to be able to play, and Tatum's going to overcompensate for the fact that Jaylen's not there, and they're going to take turns playing through injury. And so none of that ended up happening. I think they both looked effective. Jaylen certainly in a little bit of pain. Post-game, he says it is what it is. We're dealing with it one game at a time. I think that's how mentally he wants to address this and how he wants to deal with this. But generally speaking, despite the fact that it wasn't a perfect game from him, it was far from it. It wasn't perfect for anybody. I thought that he was actually one of their most effective players, and especially in that fourth quarter, he was critical to keying that run to bring them back within striking distance. Then he picks up his 5th foul, and Joe Mazzulla pulled him, and I disagreed with this. This is just like my thing, and I'm sure a lot of people disagree with this, but I just think head coaches should just leave their star players out in that scenario, let them foul out, rather than pulling them for that critical 3-minute stretch that, he comes back with like a minute to go. And at that point, they were already in trouble. They were down by 4 and he wasn't really able to do anything. So that being said, I think the fact that he was one of the driving forces for that run, he plays 4 minutes in this one. I don't think that he was on any sort of restriction. He probably would have played more if it wasn't for the foul trouble. But big picture, and again, I keep bringing it back to the big picture because obviously this game was a slog, so a lot of things were tough about this one. The fact that he was able to go and was able to find ways to impact this game and wasn't a defensive liability. I thought that he looked pretty solid. It is another positive from this one. So those are the 3. I'm honestly struggling to come up with a 4th. I guess the 4th is going to be that they have a 2-1 lead in the series, because these kinds of games, if you drop one of the first 2, you don't go on one of those big second half runs, you're tied 1-1, you come here and now you're hobbled and this and that, and now you're trailing. Like, that's not a good place to be. So far, they won their home games. They lost their road game. They say that the series starts when the home team loses. The Celtics are going to want to definitely go and steal game 4. They don't want to come back here. But I never thought this was going to be a sweep. This Magic team is too competitive. They're too elite defensively, one of the best defenses in the league. They have 2 really elite star players in Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero. Like, I was very impressed with both of those guys through 3 games. And, even though Franz was 11 of 27 tonight, I thought that he had timely plays. He had 8 assists, 7 rebounds, only 1 turnover. So there was just a lot to like about those guys. So all that to say, I really respect this Magic team as from their skill level, from just how well coached they are, how hard playing they are. I do think they're a little bit dirty, but I don't really like to use that term because I think that some of those plays, there's not giving up on plays, but the yanking guys in the air I could do without. And I'm not saying they're the only team that does it, but I do feel like they've been doing it a little bit too much. So KCP doing it to Tatum when he came back in, I was like, are we really doing this? So it's a little bit of an aside. But I think the fact of the matter is that the Celtics are not in a bad spot in this series. They're still leading 2-1, despite the fact that they haven't really been able to find much of an offensive rhythm through 3 games. And I had them winning in 5 games. I still think they're going to win in 5 games. I think they're going to come out in game 4, take care of business, and close things out at home. And I never thought this was going to be a sweep. And if you're going to win one game, game 3 is like the classic game that the underdog team is going to win. They're back home. They're rejuvenated. They're in front of their own crowd. The role players are going to be a little bit better. KCP is still 0 for 3. It's kind of been remarkable how much he struggled. But I think you saw Cole Anthony. He was really impactful in this game, despite the fact that he only had 4 points and played 15 minutes. He made his presence so, and it was just fouling, but he was a pest and he was energizing the crowd. I think Anthony Black had good moments. Jonathan Isaac had good moments. So in general, I think they fed off the home crowd, and it's very in character for the lower seeded team to come back home and feed off that adrenaline. So it's just not a catastrophic loss. You kind of expect that they're going to drop one of these. It's not going to be a sweep. I never thought that they were going to sweep this Magic team, and that's why you just keep it in perspective. So big picture, the fact that Tatum was good to go after having this injury that Mazzulla was describing as severe on the radio yesterday, and everybody was thinking, what does that really mean? Jaylen, after being on the injury report as well, and I thought that he looked like he's just continuing to play through the pain. I think when it's all said and done, we're going to realize that he played through a lot of pain to be available for this team. But I think he's continuing to do it. And then so much went wrong, and they still found ways to be impactful. And then Luke is a big one. Luke was able to really kind of have an input on this game, and even though it wasn't perfect and it wasn't regular season Luke necessarily, he really wasn't able to find his way at all. And I think maybe something that he could build off for future games. So it's possible I actually did 5 things. Tatum, Tatum's availability, Brown's availability, Luke's impact, and then the fact that so much went wrong and they were still able to win this game, and the fact that it's 2-1. So I guess those things can be combined. But it's almost 1:30 here. I've been in this building since 4 o'clock, so it's been many, many hours for me at the Kia Center. Saturday, we will hear from Celtics players on Zoom. Strangely enough, we don't usually do that. I think it's just the nature of where they are staying. It's far from Orlando's downtown. And then Sunday, back shoot around. We'll have coverage on post-game show after that game. Important game 4. That's the swing game 4. That's the, you either go up 3-1 and you have a really sizable lead and you kind of, in this kind of circumstance, I think you kind of win the game. You win the series. Or you are going back home tied 2-2, knowing for sure you're coming back to Orlando. So massively important game. Stakes are going to be high. Last year versus Cleveland versus Miami, they found themselves in that position up 2-1, and they were able to close out that game 3 and come away with 3-1 leads back home and close things out. And they never actually went back anywhere. So that was last year's team. Obviously, this seems different, but that's what they're going to want to do. So if you're a Celtics fan, obviously this was a tough watch. Third quarter, I would not rewatch it. If this is not your job, I'll be rewatching it, but I wouldn't if I were you, if you're just watching stuff for leisure. But just considering where we were Friday morning, where Tatum and Brown both seem like they could be dealing with something that could keep them out of a few games, it's a good sign that they were both to go today and both look pretty healthy. Drew Holiday misses this game with a right hamstring strain. No information about that. So I imagine he'll be in the injury report again tomorrow, but I don't know if it's a long-term concern or not. So that's what I keep our eye on. But as always, thank you for watching. It's a little bit easier to do 4 encouraging things after wins, but I'm going to stick to this format because I think that it's, there's going to be a lot of negative podcasts, which there should be because they lost. And I did a show with Bobby, and I did a post-game show on CLNS Media. So you can find all those in CLNS Media, but this is your dose of things that were encouraging about the game and just encouraging about the situation that they find themselves in right now. So with that, thank you as always for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, You Got Boston Podcast. You can listen on Apple, Spotify, all of our post-game coverage. Jaylen Brown talked about how they want to, maybe they should have spied it out to see who advances to the second round. It was a pretty entertaining interview. You can catch them on CLNS Media. Kristaps Porzingis opened up, but it struggles in the locker room. He's pretty frustrated with himself right now. He knows he hasn't been as effective as he wants to be. You can catch that on CLNS Media as well. And then Jayson Tatum responds to Joe Mazzulla saying, "Get up," and more. So check all those interviews out on CLNS Media. Check out my podcast, You Got Boston Podcast, after every game for the rest of the playoff run, as I'll be focusing on things that I find encouraging from these games. And you can read my written words at CelticsBlog.com. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.